Hello, thank you for listening to 3 Legacies Recovery Recordings. If you enjoy our program, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to share with a friend. We're also self-supporting, so feel free to contribute to the channel through Venmo at Recovery Recordings 615. Please note that the views expressed on this podcast are solely our individual views and do not represent any official stance of any 12-step program. We are not affiliated with any specific recovery organization, and this content should not be considered as professional advice for alcoholism or addiction.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to 3 Legacies Recovery Recordings Podcast. I'm your host, Paul. Today is Wednesday, September 3rd, 2025. This is episode 65. You can reach us at Recovery Recordings 615. If you have any talks that you would like possibly get posted on the YouTube channel. I think there's a lot of people that aren't aware on the YouTube channel. There's a lot of AA and just different recovery talks. It's not just the podcast. I think it actually started out as I think there's probably 600 or so different talks. Just Alcoholics Anonymous, CA. There's some CA stuff, some Al-Anon talks, all kinds of stuff on there. So get on there and check it out. I know that part of the YouTube channel gets a lot of attention. So if you're new to the channel and all you know is our podcast, get on there and check it out. There's all kinds of talks. You can also find us on, we have a private Facebook page. It's 3 Legacies Recovery Recordings Podcast, and you can get on there and send us a friend's request, and we will add you. You can also find us on Audible, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and other major platforms. This upcoming week, we have a super cool guy. I'm excited to chat with him. His name's David H. from Broomfield, Colorado, and it's going to be a week from today, next Wednesday. It's November 10th, and we're calling it Self-Examination, Prayer, and Meditation, and an Unshakable Foundation for Life. Super excited about that. And then tonight, we have Jane W., all the way from Nashville, back on the show. How you doing, Jane?
Hey, Paul, I'm good. How you doing?
I'm doing good. It's been a busy week. Like I told you earlier, I was in Knoxville working earlier today, but I'm back, and I'm glad to be back. How about yourself?
Nice, I bet. Oh, I'm doing great. Thank you. We had a long weekend, and I've just really been reading a lot of books and making a lot of herbal tea. It's the exciting life of a sober alcoholic.
Nice. What kind of books you like reading?
Oh my gosh. Well, a lot of books on outside issues, actually. So I won't mention too many of those. But I love some novels. I recently finished reading Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sower and then Parable of the Talents. Pretty great. Nice.
So what about I do talk, just because it's technically not an AA setting. Sometimes I'll talk about different spiritual books. What's some of your favorite spiritual daily readers over the years that you found?
Oh gosh. Somebody gave me the AA Daily Reflections book. I think pretty early, maybe like at 30 days or something, as a gift. It was actually the person who answered the phone when I called AA for the first time. I'm still in touch with her. Wow. And she gave me the Daily Reflection. So I read that every day for a long time. I now do have a religious tradition of my own. And so nice. I have daily prayers, morning and evening prayers that I say that are specifically religious, but I tend to blend them with the third step prayer in the morning. I still usually say the third step prayer in the morning and just some other more familiar ones. And then I think rather than having a daily reader, I'm doing some more in-depth study in my religious life. So nice. Usually once a week I'll go to a coffee shop and bring some stuff. And sometimes I watch a soccer game and I don't touch anything serious. And sometimes I kind of dive in on an old prayer and try to learn more about it.
Wow. Nice. Do you do that with a group or by yourself or what?
I do that part by myself, but I also spend a lot of time meeting with sponsees on those days, but one at a time. I've never been much good in a group. I really prefer to study things by myself and then deliver a report to one person.
Nice. That's awesome. Yeah. I tell you, for the listeners, we're calling this episode "Vital Spiritual Experience," and Jane had a lot of immense stuff she wanted. There's several things we were wanting to touch on, and we kind of rounded it off. I figured we'd be in conversation about several different things, so we're calling this "Vital Spiritual Experience." And I was just on the phone with a guy about an hour ago about how my grand sponsor at probably, I say grand sponsor, but about 90 days in, I'd heard him say, I don't even know that he said this, but I heard him say, he was like, you either grow spiritually or you're on your way to a drink, right? And it scared me to death, right? And and I remember, like, I just went and like just started seeking. We were talking, me and my buddy were talking about Bill W. and just how over the years he just did all kinds of, that's what he did. He's always seeking. And so I started getting pretty deep into meditation at that point, different forms of meditation, mindfulness meditation, but I get it. I ended up getting into a lot of different religious studies, and I really got into, I've probably read 200 Buddhist books over the years. I love Buddhist stuff, Buddhist thought stuff. But yeah, so I get it. I tell you though, it kind of leads into what the topic is, this vital spiritual experience. When I first came into Alcoholics Anonymous, I didn't realize that's, obviously like that was not my problem, right? My problem,
right.
I needed a car, I needed to get her off my back, my family to be okay. I was dealing with a court case, and, the idea of a vital spiritual experience was the last thing, I don't even think it was ever on the list at the time. At the time though, I'll tell you though, that certain spiritual terms I was kind of attracted to. Right? I could accept some of it, like spirit of the universe. I could accept that. Thank God that. What I'm really grateful for is that in AA they didn't brand this whole spiritual thing. Right?
Yeah,
you get
definitely.
What I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I came into AA, I think I mentioned it last time, but I came into AA without, specific religious baggage or trauma or history, which I count myself fortunate. I know that some people count themselves fortunate to, have a tradition that they come in with, and I think that's beautiful, and then folks reconnect with it. I felt grateful that I was kind of a blank slate. I mean, I was really coming in. What I had to do around step 2 was not so much like figure out who a higher power was or pick one or anything, which is kind of what I thought I was supposed to do. But, it was explained to me that instead, what I'm supposed to do is identify my own old ideas, prejudices, what is it in me that's blocking me? And I'm just supposed to it's inventory. This is why I love inventory. I'm supposed to maybe make a list of the things that are in my little mental file under God, under religion, under spiritual, and see what beliefs I have. And then my job is to let those go as much as possible. And then that's it. And then I don't go try and figure out what God is for me. Instead, I leave space and I try to allow that space where I used to have a lot of thoughts and ideas and resistance to just stay open and then see what comes into it. And, I think that's, it's a scary way to think about it because it only works if something does come into it, but also it's so honest, that I know I'm not I know I'm not making anything up. I know I'm just waiting to see. And I love that. And what I found when I did that inventory was really, that I had a lot of old ideas about, I had a lot of fear that I was going to become religious. I had a fear of becoming a specific religion that I thought we were going to get tricked into being. And I also just had a fear of becoming the type of person who walks around talking about God all the time, because I find that type of person really irritating. So it was really about the type of people. I was afraid of becoming a certain type of person, but really when I looked at it, none of my fears were actually about a higher power. And so that's what kind of opened up that space to enable something new to come in there.
Yeah, that's great. I tell you, I can really relate to that. I had a whole lot of old baggage when it comes to certain concepts of God, right? And one of them was just a damning God. I still have people that are really close to me family members that like I can have a conversation with them. Like I could call them when we got off this, and they'll make comments to me like, "Man, I'm just so glad you're doing better. I just, burning in hell. I didn't want, didn't want you to burn in hell. And I was raised like that, right? So so I had like these ideas because let me put it this way, like so. I had these ideas for years of like, I don't even know that they told me this. It's just what I heard was like the better Paul does, the more God loves me, right?
Yes.
And I was not doing good. Right?
Yeah.
I'd been doing a lot of dirt for years. So I like how my current sponsor, when we talk about agnostics, he says someone with a working or without a working, effective experiential relationship with, right?
Mm-hmm.
And but what we do is we do the same thing. We talk about like if I'm going to make a decision in the third step to turn my will and my life over to this power, right? That would like what does he need to be or not need to be if I'm actually going to follow through with that, right? And it's funny because there's this guy, there's several guys in my hometown that when I make comments like this at a meeting, they kind of get offended and they're like, you can't, it's not, it's almost like they think I'm saying like it's a build your God type deal, right? But it's really like what you said, you're really trying to find out what old ideas are standing in the way of you forming a relationship with this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Totally.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, like everything in AA is so practical. So like if my job in step 2 is just to identify my old ideas, like I can do that. That's much less daunting than figuring out God.
Sure.
So I can do that, and then I can leave space. And then the next thing we do is we just keep moving. Like I've heard, how do you know if you've done the third step? You have a pen in your hand and you're doing the fourth. Like that kind of thing is really helpful for me to, because the thing is, like, if I leave that space, if I become willing to believe in a power greater than myself, even if I didn't believe, I actually had a really clear moment sitting with my sponsor, reading The Agnostics together in a coffee shop and reading that sentence, do I now believe, or am I even willing to believe? Or does he now believe, or is he even willing to believe?
Yeah.
And in that moment, I realized that, if angels showed up in my bedroom with trumpets announcing that there is a God, I would look up hallucinations on the internet. Like, and that's the definition of unwillingness, right? There was no proof that would have satisfied me at that time. And so in that moment, I don't consider that moment proof that there is a God, but I did consider that moment proof that I was resistant to the idea that there was a God. And so if I can just let go of my resistance and then see what happens, for me, that was really profound. And I did understand that willingness, I'd read the Spiritual Experience Appendix by that point, and willingness, honesty, and open-mindedness are indispensable. And I knew, the one thing I really knew was that I really didn't want to drink anymore. And I knew that I couldn't stop myself. And so if willingness is indispensable, well, then I can't be unwilling here in step 2. So that was really important to me. I want to read, if I can, just because I think it's relevant, from There Is a Solution on page 27. Okay. There are a bunch of places in our literature where I think the description of a higher power really does feel pretty Christian and pretty male. And there's nothing wrong with Christianity and there's nothing wrong with maleness, but neither of those two things felt really relatable to me in terms of a higher power. And I know that a lot of people have that experience. And so it was really important for me to look for the places where I don't feel alienated in our literature. And so there are several places where a spiritual experience is described in a way that I really can relate to. So there's this one place where we're talking about a certain American businessman, that's Roland Hazard, who had gone to Europe and placed himself in the care of the psychiatrist Carl Jung. And the doctor says, you have the mind of a chronic alcoholic. I've never seen one single case recover where that state of mind existed to the extent that it does in you. And Roland says, is there no exception? Yes, replied the doctor, there is. Exceptions to cases such as yours have been occurring since early times. Here and there, once in a while, alcoholics have had what are called vital spiritual experiences. To me, these occurrences are phenomena. They appear to be in the nature of huge emotional displacements and rearrangements. Ideas, emotions, and attitudes, which were once the guiding force of the lives of these men, are suddenly cast to one side, and a completely new set of conceptions and motives begin to dominate them.
Nice.
And so, the word phenomena, the way I understand that word, what he's saying is, I don't know why that happens. It's a phenomenon, meaning it's not something I can explain. But it is something I've seen. And I love the phrase, huge emotional displacements and rearrangements.
Yeah.
Like that is such, I wanted that. I didn't know if I wanted a spiritual experience when I got sober, but I certainly wanted huge emotional displacements and rearrangements because I was just, cooked. I was so scared and so sad and so angry and so confused. And I had no idea how to fix any of that.
Wow. Yeah, man, that's good. Yeah. Also, I love when I'm taking a guy through this little story right here. I love setting up the context, and the context for the newer listeners that aren't familiar with what's going on in the story. You got Rowan Hazard, which is a member of a wealthy family. One of the richest families out there. And I don't know about how true that statement is. They're just wealthy, right? And then you got Carl Jung, which is one of the best psychiatrists at this time, and a real big guy. So, he's trying everything and everything he can to try to get right, and it's still not effective, right?
Yeah,
I love adding that to this, and I tell you, mate, when I was thinking about the podcast the other day, what we were going to talk about, here's what really kind of keeps shining a light to me. It's like my last sponsor, he used to share this story. He said, Paul had the desire to stop drinking. He passed away just a few months ago, and but he passed away 32 years sober. He said I was the guy that for years and years I showed up at the AA meeting drunk, cussing everybody out, telling them I thought they were full of crap, right? He was like, March 15th, I showed up drunk, cussed everybody out. March 16th, I showed up drunk, cussed everybody out. March 17th, I woke up and something was different, right? And he called it an act of providence, right? And when he would share that story, what he would say was like, I hadn't worked the first step, like I didn't have a sponsor that I talked to at that time on a normal basis, I was kind of half measure, isn't it? And it was like something changed, like something happened. I had some kind of spiritual awakening, right? And I love how, if you go to the the appendix 2, spiritual experience, how it talks about the educational variety, and sometimes it's a white light thing. I'm more, I have had some pretty like profound, aha, like wow moments, and then, they're shortly lost, right? So like, I'm more of an educational variety, and luckily I've been a pretty, I do a lot of seeking, since I was, pretty early in recovery, but really, like, it's almost like, okay, a power greater than myself has separated me from alcohol since 2016, right? I didn't even believe in a power greater than myself, right? At that time, I really didn't. I mean, like, if there was one, it for sure didn't care about me, right? So I go through this process and I start, setting aside old prejudices, finding out how I have all these old ideas that are getting in the way, yada, yada, yada. And I start having this, I wake up spiritually, and I start forming a relationship with, a conscious contact with this, whatever is keeping me sober.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I also love the spiritual experience appendix, and that's, it's got one of my other favorite phrases, which I think I mentioned last time. I say the word God because it's short, but with few exceptions, our members find that they have tapped an unsuspected inner resource, which they presently identify with their own conception of a power greater than themselves. And of course, presently means later. So first we identify an unsuspected inner resource, and then we decide that we can call that a higher power if we want. And just both of those. I love that I had a sponsor who walked me through the book, including doing stuff like looking at the appendix when it comes up, because I really could have, that spiritual experience appendix is one of the places where I think I could have, if I had missed that, I could have missed something pretty important about there being space for lots of different versions of huge emotional displacements and rearrangements that amount to a vital spiritual experience without necessarily looking the same or sounding the same as the one that Bill Wilson had. Another thing I want to say too is about, you mentioned like having those burning bush moments. I always think about the fact that like that famous moment in the Mayflower Hotel when Bill Wilson is standing, he's been sober for a little bit, and he's had a bad day, and he is looking into the bar and he's thinking, I could go in there and I could just have some ginger ale and meet a friend. And then he realizes that in that moment he is this close to a drink, and that's why he does the research, makes the phone call that leads him to Dr. Bob and leads to Alcoholics Anonymous. He had a profound spiritual experience that was the type where, he uses language like the clean wind of a mountaintop blew through me, just like the most unrelatable language that many people have never experienced anything like it. So you can have that kind of a spiritual experience, and then a few months later, if you're not doing the work, staying in conscious contact, you can be this close to a drink again. So it's that daily reprieve business.
It shows how vital also the just the daily application of principles, right? Because
definitely,
I was talking to a buddy the other day, and he was talking, he's a couple years sober, and he's going on this kick where he's listening to all these podcasts on like psychedelics and this and this and this, and I was like, the truth is like, even if you go have like a really profound spiritual experience, like say you set all that up, if your principles aren't changed, it's just you're going back to the same boat, right?
Totally.
Like what is your daily living?
I mean, one of my favorite spiritual teachers, and might be somebody that you've read. It's I think a Buddhist. I know a Buddhist guy. I'm thinking Jack Kornfield is his name. I'm feeling weird about saying names of spiritual teachers on this podcast.
Yeah, it's okay.
But I've already said this one. So, but he's got a book that's called After the Ecstasy, The Laundry. And that's just a perfect encapsulation of like, I can have a profound, clean wind of a mountaintop feeling of connection, which is, by the way, the best high I've ever experienced. It's so good. And then I will still need to do the laundry, and I will still have alcoholism, and I will still get a resentment. Like there's going to be work that needs to continue to be done. It's
awesome. And for the book and the names and all this, for if there's any listeners, if you're brand new and you don't understand anything about traditions, this is not an Alcoholics Anonymous setting. I wouldn't be talking about stuff, certain stuff in an AA setting. This is a sober podcast, and we're not speaking for AA or affiliated with them on this podcast. So like, I completely get that. It's one of those situations where you start to see as you go through the process how like you're blocked. You got resentment, fear. We talked about this last week for the listeners. Go back last week. We did an inventory episode on inventory a week ago, and you go through that process and you find out how you have the guilt, shame, remorse, all the harms we've been doing over the years, how we owe the money, resentment, fear, we've been playing God in so many different ways, and all that stuff blocks us, right? And, you had talked about wanting to touch on the amends process. This would probably be a good time to touch on some of that.
Yeah, I think so. Although actually first I'm going to touch on the nightly review because that's, we talked about inventory last week and I never ended up talking about the nightly review version, the daily inventory, when I'm in the practice of taking a daily inventory, which at this moment I am not. I am not getting an A+ in Alcoholics Anonymous right now. But when I do it, the format that I use is and there are places in the 12 and 12 where it talks about how there are different types of inventory, and one of them is this daily version. And that one of the ways you can look at it is a balance sheet for the day, credits and debits. And so that's the way that I organize it. I do 3, I would say columns, but they're not columns. I kind of do them in rows, but 3 sections. So I start with credits, and I just title that with a plus symbol.
Right.
And in there, I put any actions I took that day that were like positive in a specifically recovery way. So if I answered the phone when a sponsee called, or if I attended a meeting, or if I called my own sponsor, or if I, made an amend, or if I, showed up for my service commitment, whatever it was, I give myself credit for those actions in the plus column. And I got to say, I love that column partly because I only give myself credit for actions and not thoughts, which means that I have absolutely had days where I have considered whether I'm going to go to a meeting, and I have realized I have nothing to put in the plus column today unless I go to this meeting, and then I'll go. So that's helpful for me. And then in the debits, I leave space under debits for, that's where I watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. Any of those things that I've found before in my, first 4-step inventory, or that I know are a pattern for me, old ideas. And if I need to take a full resentment inventory or fear inventory or something, then I'll do it in that section. So it'll be plus actions, and then debits will be, any places. Usually for me, it's a lot of fear inventory, because that's kind of my emotional homeland.
I get it.
And then the last section I do is gratitude. And I do that. I just title that one with a heart. It's very twee. And that's where I notice positive thoughts. In the 12 and 12, it does say that you can credit yourself with positive intentions and thoughts. I don't put those in my plus column because I'm such a liar that I can talk myself into having had a super great day because I had a lot of positive thoughts. But I look at those as a gift instead. So I put them in gratitude. So I'll put under gratitude, I'll put I didn't get mad when so-and-so said such and such to me, noticing that as spiritual progress rather than as something I take credit for. And that 3-section inventory has been my favorite way to do a nightly review, and kind of one of the ways that I try and keep the channel clear.
Wow, that's good. I like that. Do you have, I would like to get a template, if you wouldn't mind. I know you'd sent me the template. Sure. For any of the listeners that would like to have, last week, Jane talked about an old ideas inventory. And if you would like to have a format on that, feel free to, you could send us an email on recoveryrecordings615@yahoo. And also, maybe if they wanted a template for what you just talked about, that'd be awesome.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I can do that. And I can type up the other ones too. I hand wrote them. So you're going to be sending JPEGs to people or whatever. So if you want me to put it in a Word document, I can do that too.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Yeah. I won't send them the other ones.
No, you can. I don't care. I've got great handwriting.
Okay, yeah. I actually enjoyed them because I could relate to them in a lot of different ways. Hey, so here's a real cool one. Okay, so JS, which is in Arizona, he ended up sending this to me. We did a podcast episode, and he sent this to me. This is his version of what he does at night, right? And I love sharing this. It says, "Evidence that I'm living in an intelligent universe." Right. It says, number 1, where was I generous with my time, attention, treasure, and affection? ? Oh. Right. Number 2, an instance the power showed its presence. Number 3, the most thoughtful act my partner, roommate, colleague did today. Number 4, where did I transcend my first thought? Number 5, what was the most beautiful thing I saw, thought, or felt today? I love that.
That is some good shit.
That's cool.
Holy cow. I would love to see that myself. And I love treasure. Where was I generous with my treasure? What a wonder. I mean, there are many things that I can think about being generous with, but man, I'm a magpie. I love collecting stuff. I love having stuff. I'm so covetous. So that would be a great question for me to ask, and a really sweet way to put the question.
Yeah, I love that. It's cool because it's even the nightly review. It's what it does is it puts the like on the forefront of my consciousness. Like, what are we really? You know, I heard a guy once say, he said, you can take like a fancy sailboat with like the best sailor out there or whatever, and every now and then, even with the expensive instruments to point you in a certain direction, you're still going to get a little bit off path, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing. Like, I can be doing working with sponsees, staying in the book, doing all this stuff, and I'm still going to be a little bit off path. And when I'm doing these nightly reviews, what it does is at least tries to somewhat line my will with what I'm aiming towards, right?
Yeah,
And
definitely.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I love how he's on this template right here. It's the intelligent universe, right? I love how like what he's doing with this is like just. Because I don't necessarily, even though I can be, well versed and read certain spiritual literature, I'm not always thinking, an instant the power showed its presence. But I'm sure if I did that quite a bit and that was on my daily stuff, like next thing you know, it would be showing up in my life a lot more, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And that what that makes me think of is just how important actions are in AA, right? It was pointed out to me early, there's no chapter into thinking or into feeling. The chapter is into action. And there have been so many times when it just doesn't matter. Yeah. It used to be before I got sober, I could only take the positive action if I had worked my way up to like feeling ready to do it. And in AA, I was really told it does not matter if you feel ready to do it or do you feel like, it doesn't matter. That like if today I go to my home group because I agreed 18 years ago that I would continue to go to my home group. Yeah. It doesn't matter how I feel about it. Yeah. I can be grumbling and groaning about it on my way there. Yeah. And I still almost all the time walk in the door. And I think that's part of why I'm still here is that I make many fewer decisions today based on how I'm feeling.
Amen. Thank God. Right. Which is brand new versus like when I first come in, right? I shared so on Monday nights, so I've had the treatment commitment for this district over the last couple of years, and Monday nights we go into a treatment facility down the road, and I was sharing, I was like, there's days where I work 10-hour day, I'm dirty, I don't feel like doing anything, I've got so much going on, yada, yada, yada. And I was like, I hope I never get to a spot where I'm not here because I don't want to be, there's all kinds of times I don't want to be there, But still, it's just what they taught me. What are my feet doing? What are my feet doing? Right. And
exactly.
I just had a sponsee call me, a few days ago talking about how like he feels a little bit of depression and yada, yada, the whole, that's the whole mix. And he's kind of stepped out of certain things, certain actions. And it's so easy, right? It's so easy. Yeah. It's also so easy to get back involved in it. And then once you start feeling better, being like, I'm good now.
That's that. And, I don't think that's unique to alcoholics. I mean, everybody I know, who's alcoholic or not tends to, well, not everybody, but most of the people I know, get into a great workout routine for a while until they feel great. And then they stop doing it. And, but it's just alcoholics will kill ourselves dead doing that in a way that most people won't.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. All right. So that's the nightly review. Yeah. Let's get into some of the admin stuff.
Yeah, well, so, I think when I first came into AA, of course, I looked at the steps, I heard the steps and how it works, and I looked at them on the wall. And genuinely, when I read step 9 about going out into the world and making direct amends to people I had harmed, I felt like I would die if I did that. Like, I truly felt like, well, obviously that's not possible. I don't know what the mechanism of death will be, but I won't survive it. And I mentioned last time, like, I'd rather be lonely than embarrassed. Like, it's just because I have that much fear of embarrassment. But, and, of course, thank God people said one step at a time, just do the one you're in. And by the time I got to 8, I was very scared of 9, but my sponsor sat down with me and we looked at all these, this list of harms I had written, and probably half of them, she was like, that's not a harm, honey. Like, you were just like, I tended to feel like I owed everybody an amend for having had the temerity to breathe air, to exist, to be in their space. So thank God for sponsorship. But anyway, so then my actual experiences, though, of making those direct amends were mostly pretty awkward for a while.
Sure.
And that was, this step is one just where I always kind of had faith that at some point I would understand it a little bit better. And I don't know that I can say I really understand it well today, but certainly better than I did. And the thing that has been showing up to me lately, which is kind of what I wanted to talk about, is how, for me, most of the repair that needs to get done takes time. Sure. It doesn't happen in the verbal conversation. Yeah. And of course we talk about, there's a long period of reconstruction ahead, but I really, I sometimes hear people talk, kind of rolling their eyes at the concept of living amends and really being like, okay, but you got to make sure that you do that verbal one, though. Make sure that I think some of us, and I'm speaking really for me here, I'm really kind of drawn to work that seems like it will be painful because that feels like I deserve it. And it will be like suffering as virtue somehow. And if I do the really hard thing, if I call up the person I'm most afraid of and I go meet with them in person, doesn't matter if they would rather receive a letter or if they would rather not see me. Yeah. For my recovery, I need to go there and just prove that I'm really hardcore. And I don't know, maybe that's not a thinking error other people are prone to, but it is one that I'm prone to, is really like almost trying to purify myself by doing things the hardest possible way. Yeah. And I've really come to believe through the experience of doing more amends and watching other people do more amends that sometimes we don't consider the other person enough of all things. I've come to, and I've never been directed to do this, but it's something that I do. And again, maybe this is something that a lot of people do, or maybe there's a reason I shouldn't do it. I don't even know, but I have people ask for consent before they even start the amend. I have people say, like, I believe I owe you an apology. We might say amend if they're familiar with that term, but if that's a new term, I might really have them say, I think I owe you an apology. Would you be interested in going out and having a cup of coffee for that conversation? Yeah. Or would you rather I write a letter? Would it be okay with you if I sent you a text message about it? What would be best for you? And that people have the right to decline if they don't want to hear it. Yeah. And I just feel like that makes us more safe. If I've done all this harm to another person who loves me and then I kind of come at them with this really aggressive, like, okay, I've got to, for my own sake, make this amend in a way that's like my sponsor said, I have to do it in person. So please meet me for lunch. Like, I love the idea that they would be allowed to say, actually, I don't think I want to do that. I'm not ready to see you. Or like, I think I'd really rather receive a letter. So anyway, that I just think about that in terms of consent in a way that I didn't used to.
Yeah, I love that. That's awesome. I tell you, I don't know how comfortable I feel saying this statement on this, but I'm going to say it.
Okay.
But my current sponsor is big on direct amends, like face to face direct amends. He says direct, you should be direct, But at the end of the day, I don't always believe that. I just, in certain settings, obviously, yes, it should be face to face. But I love what you're saying as far as. I forgot the wording you used, but pretty much just asking, how they feel about it. I love that. So me and Katie, Katie P had got on, we did, I don't know if you listened, I think you mentioned you maybe heard.
I did, yeah.
I don't know. That. Towards the end of it, she'd read some of those letters. Did you read some of them? Or did you hear that?
I heard them. Yeah, they're lovely.
Yeah. So that's huge, right? So it was one of those things where she had made the comment. She was like, when she went to make to her stepmom, she went to go make the amends, and she just bawled her eyes out, right? And she's like, I wish I would have wrote a letter, right?
Yeah.
And man, I tell you, and I love how she talks, goes in depth with like the feeling concept of like how we made them feel, right? And Because that's huge, right? Like if you just
Yeah.
sit there and you're just there, this is what I did, yada, yada, yada.
Right.
All
Yeah.
right, dude, come on now. But whenever,
Yeah.
when the other person realizes, it's more personal when the other person realizes, like, wow, like,
Definitely.
that they mean that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
And I think, go ahead. Sorry.
No, so I love the idea of it's for the listeners. If your sponsor tells you do it direct, go do it direct.
Yeah.
That's why I said
You
I didn't
cannot
want
just quote Jane W. on the internet sometime in 2025.
But
Yeah.
no, like at the end of the day, I think I took it so freaking, so cookie cutter for so long, right? I just beat
did
people over the
too.
head with the book, and it's just BS. It's just
Well,
BS.
yeah, and like I think of one verbal amend I made where I asked somebody to meet me for coffee, and I realized after we were sitting together for coffee that he thought I wanted to get back in a relationship with him because I had not correctly introduced the conversation. And if I had said to him, I think I owe you an apology, or I think I owe you an amend, are you interested in hearing that? He would have been much better prepared for the conversation. And in fact, he came there like, it was pretty clear to me, kind of full of hope. That I was going to say, I've gotten sober and I've reconsidered and I would love to get back to whatever. So, I don't love that. Another thing is like, I want, I think the verbal amend obviously is like, I loved how KDP talked about like how necessary it is to individualize. It really depends instance to instance. And of course, there are absolutely moments when like I need to be willing to do the verbal amend if it's, or like the verbal amend in person, if it's the right thing to do. I think about on page 80, right? If we have obtained permission, have consulted with others, asked God to help, and the drastic step is indicated, we must not shrink. Like I'm going to any length for victory over alcohol. So I will, of course, do it. But I just need to make sure that my motive is not like machismo or, trying to prove something or trying to purify myself through suffering. And that I have actually, there are these places, I think on page 78, over up at the top, it's just talking about, there's an example of making an amend, and it says, if our manner is calm, frank, and open, we'll be gratified with the result. So that's kind of, I love those guideposts. I'm looking for a manner that is calm, frank, and open. And in working with others, there's a line where it talks about our conversation being sane, quiet, and full of human understanding. And like, I think if I can just focus a little bit more on like, what does this other person most want? What does repair actually look like for this other person? I do think sometimes a verbal conversation is really important, but the verbal conversation for me is only a signal that I intend to continue to do the repair. That's the real repair. Like I really think the living amend usually is the real repair. Most of the time I didn't do the damage by saying words one time. And so I can't repair it by saying words one time. I need to be changing and be showing up in a different way.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I was at a men's retreat in Maryland probably 2 or 3 years ago, and Sheldon F. from Las Vegas was leading the retreat, and he'd made the comment. He was like, technically, I'm probably going to botch this, Sheldon, if you're listening, sorry. But he was like, when you show up to verbalize that amends, like you're making the announcement that the amends is on its way, right?
There you go, yeah.
Which I love that because that's what it is. I mean, it's, I like the year before Charlie P passed away. I had some amends stuff, and I'd called him. I talked to him about a couple things, and him and one of his guys kind of walked me through like what they think makes a good amends, right? And they were like, so the person needs to know that you're there to make an amends, right? They need to realize you need to here's what I know that I did, yada yada yada, own up to what you did. Also, like, it could be a negative or a positive. And when they would say that, they were like, say you've been walking around talking crap about them or whatever. So then, I would stop. How do I set the books right? Well, I'm going to stop doing the stuff I've been doing, right? Or maybe I need to pay back money or whatever, so I'm going to add whatever. So,
Right.
and then the last two was, how did that make you feel? And also, I'm insensitive. I'm extremely insensitive at times. So, what am I not aware of, right? Like, what did I do? Is there something that I'm not aware of that I'm not bringing up right now? And which is huge, right? But I tell you though, I really like what you was just talking about with. It makes all the sense in the world. Another thing I got from Charlie though was there's different contexts in the big book, right? There's this one spot in the book where it says to the man that that obviously you got beef with this guy, right? And it says that when you get there for you to make the comment to him, I'm here to make this amends, because if I don't, I may not overcome drinking, right? But you don't want to use that technically, not in certain settings. Like if you don't want to make that comment to your mom, you know what I mean?
Right.
It's pretty insensitive if you're doing something like that. But
definitely.
But so the context is like, you're in the front of an individual that's probably sitting there like, what the heck is this guy doing in my friggin' office or whatever, Yeah. Now that statement can be appropriate in that setting,
Definitely. And I think it's in the same area. Another of the lines that always kind of raise my eyebrows a little bit. It's talking about it's harder to go to an enemy than to a friend. Yeah. We go to him in a helpful and forgiving spirit, confessing our former ill feeling and expressing our regret. I just think, maybe express my former ill feeling, but maybe not. Yeah. I have received an amend before, where somebody came up to me after a meeting and was like, I want you to know that I've been gossiping about you a lot. And I'm really sorry. I was like, what? I didn't know that. I kind of knew that she didn't like me very much, but I'm not sure that amend would have passed the sponsor test. But here is one thing I do want to say though, because I have had, there are a couple of instances where I do think that it could make sense to confess something that will hurt the other person. And I had one of these experiences, and this is one of the things that I think finally gave me enough confidence to think like, okay, maybe I do understand a little bit about this amend process. It's not quite as mysterious as it used to be. I had an experience where a family member of mine, whom I adore beyond reason, and have a really hard time being around for long periods of time. I was 10 years sober and I had made a verbal amend, and I had been doing my best. Like I had been doing my best at a living amend for this whole time. For a decade, I'd been doing my best, the best repairs I could do. And this family member said to me as we were sitting together doing a puzzle, I have never understood why you just shut down and leave sometimes. And the other people in our family tell me what it is I did wrong. And you never tell me. And so I never know. And I never know what to do differently. And so she was asking me, right? She was saying, I know I'm doing something that upsets you, that gives you an ill feeling, basically. Yeah. And it hurts me not to know what it is. So will you please hurt my feelings as a method of doing this repair?
That's big.
And so I know. It was nuts. And by the way, if you ever need to have just like an incredibly deep and potentially painful conversation with somebody where it could get awkward, I recommend doing it over a puzzle, because there's something about like doing something like we're not having to make eye contact. There can be long periods of silence where we're both just sort of processing. Anybody can get up and go get a cup of tea at any time. It's not like you abandon the other person. Anyway, so I ended up telling her something about herself that was painful for her, but that she was saying to me, basically, I know there's something. Please tell me what it is. And I think too, if I were in a relationship, like I've heard of people making amends that included confessing to a partner that they never really loved them. And I'm like, oh God, that doesn't sound. But if I didn't really love my partner and my partner has been begging me to tell the truth about it for a long time, then yeah, I probably do need to say something like that. So I don't know. I just, time and trust and, that's, that conversation was not available to me when I was first doing my amends at 6 months sober because I wasn't different enough. I hadn't changed enough.
Yeah.
And so it's an ongoing process to keep checking in, I think.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. How do you feel about situations where, because this is like a common thing that's come up. So I'll have sponsees or whatever. Like I've had this conversation 2 or 3 times over the last 3 weeks. Let's put it that way. Where I'll have a sponsee that's got about 6 years of sobriety right now, and he's like, "Yeah, I made this amends when I was, my first year of sobriety, but it was kind of like, I don't even remember how it went. You get what I mean?" Yeah. And they're asking like, how do I feel about going and reapproaching the situation? What's your experience of that?
I mean, I think that would, of course, have to depend on the situation. If it's like an ongoing relationship with somebody and it feels like there's something unsaid, or then it might be worth asking if they want to have that conversation again. But I would ask for consent before doing that, because it might just be that they're like, man, we already had one fucking awkward conversation over like, I don't want to do it again. And I know some people feel like in order to help the alcoholic, they have to sit through a conversation they really don't want to. And I want to be sensitive to that too. But I think in other situations, like if I did my best and it's not the same way I would make an amend today, but it's not a person I see anymore, and I am doing the living amend, like in all my other relationships, I probably would leave it alone unless there was a really compelling reason. Like if I'm sure there's something I didn't say or address that's important.
Gotcha.
But I'm not sure I would do anything about it unless I was sure.
Gotcha. Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think about it?
Yeah, I like that. I didn't think about the asking them though. I love that answer. I always go over, I don't think there's a cookie cutter. It's generally, I'll find out like how personal it is, whatever the situation is that that they're wanting to approach, and usually, your first year of sobriety, you're not really aware of a lot of stuff.
No. Yeah, for sure.
5 or 6 years later, a lot more stuff is like, wow, okay.
Yeah.
A lot of my stuff with my family has been one of those situations where like, just never, specifically my parents, I didn't allow them to be parents, and, it wasn't until, later on in life where I realized like I was strung out by the time I was 14, 15 years old. Right. And so at that young age, they didn't know what to do with me. Right. So a lot of their parenting stuff at the time, I'd kind of stole from them, so, there's been situations where I've had a sponsee come to me and say like, hey, look, I'm in this situation. They got several years of sobriety. They're doing pretty good in life, and their family and them, and they've been building this relationship back with their family, and they're in a situation where they're needing some money for like whatever it is, a certain situation that came up, buy a house or whatever, right? And they'll come to me and ask me like, how do you feel about this? And like at the end of the day, it's one of those situations where like, like parents like to parent, they like to help. You get what I mean? Like they that's a situation where like if you have a kid that's doing great and like killing it and yada yada yada, it's a gift for a parent to be able to help, right?
Yeah, totally. When I think about like, if I think of somebody I adore, who might someday want to make an amend to me, like somebody who is killing themselves slowly via alcoholism and, never has money and doesn't have a place to live and is always sad and is, sick all the time. Like, if I think about what I want an amend to me to look like, I don't care about a conversation. I'll sit through a conversation because I love the person, but I don't care. What I want is to see them okay. That's all I want. Like that's what repair actually looks like. And I just really think that sometimes maybe not for all of us, maybe this doesn't happen to everybody, but I really think that sometimes we can let our alcoholism drive what we think amends should look like, that it should be big and powerful and a really good story and really painful and like the most hardcore way to do an amend that you possibly could do. And it doesn't center the other person necessarily.
Yeah. It's all, I get that. I tell you, my sponsor has several different, like powerful amends stories, right? And like, I'm more of the awkward guy, right? Like I'll walk away from them pretty freaking awkward, right? And
same.
But there are like my amends with my grandparent, my grandpa. He, there's been situations where like my relationship with him and also my mom, honestly, my relationship with him has just changed since the amends, right? Specifically my grandpa, right? And where there was things where over the last couple of years he'd been going through certain stuff, and me and him, there's been times where we talked every week, like 2 or 3 times a week, right? And talk about having spiritual conversations, right? And it's been cool just watching the relationships grow, and it's been pretty cool.
Yeah. I mean, that's beautiful. What it makes me think of, like on 77, right? At the moment we are trying to put our lives in order, but this is not an end in itself. Our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people about us. Like, I think the verbal amend is an open door. At its best, that's kind of what it is to me. Yeah. It's like, and even if I just ask, hey, I think I owe you an apology. Are you interested in hearing that sometime? And you say, ooh, I don't think I want to talk to you. And I say, okay, you've got my number now. Anytime you change your mind, I'm here and I'm ready to do that. Yeah. Like, that's an open door without putting a lot of pressure on the other person. And I think, the more classic, and I do, to be clear, in case anyone is wondering, I do know how to make a proper verbal amend, the one where I do like list my harms and I say, and I actually have people, say like, here are the ways I'm aware that I hurt you, and here are the ways I'm guessing it might have made you feel, but I would love to hear how it actually made you feel if you want to share that. Because I also think that it's only going to be a guess, what I kind of stole or took from the other person. And then of course to say, here's what I'm trying to do to make that right as well as I can. Is there anything else that you would like to see from me, or anything else you want to say? So I do know how to do that, but I also, but that can also be an open door too. There are instances, I know of instances. There are very powerful, beautiful, like that conversation is life-changing experiences that people have. I have had many more experiences where that conversation was okay. I checked it off the list. I did it, but then that person was no longer anxious about seeing me, and I was no longer anxious about seeing them. And then the next time we saw each other, we had a quick conversation about something, and we were able to rebuild a relationship because of that amend.
Yeah, that's huge. Yeah, there's, instead of dodging or whatever, right? It's like you go through a phase where you're trying to dodge somebody, you realize there's something that needs to be said, right? It's like,
oh my gosh, yes. Yeah.
Wow.
So much of that.
Yeah. So, I love all this. It's, it just deepens the experience, right? It just deepens. Yeah. It also deepens, like when you confront somebody and you're willing to share, and you share what you've been mean spirited or whatever the situation is that's going on, and then they reveal certain things to you that you're not aware of. It takes that 10 and 11s in a little bit deeper, right? Like it changes how I'm looking, like my day-to-day interactions in life, right? And
definitely, I think it takes 6 and 7 deeper too. Oh shit, like maybe I knew that I had this habit that was careless or thoughtless or inconsiderate, but I didn't know how it was harming people around me. And it was, it's harder to let go of stuff. It becomes easier for me to let go of stuff when it's so clear how it's harming somebody.
Yeah, it's crazy how, it's funny, we were just talking about it. I think I maybe mentioned this last week, but me and it was either Judy or Juanita, but we were talking about applying the tradition principles to our life, and how, like, if you don't have like a decent, 7th step awareness, a lot of it's not even going to even seem like it's attractive to you to try to unity. It's like, come on now, right?
Yeah.
Awesome, man. What else? You got anything else you want to share? What else comes to mind?
I mean, I think that's my list of things. I could tell one more amends story, I guess, that comes to mind, just to make the point again that that this stuff is pretty individual. I had I don't know if I want to tell that story actually. I'll tell a short version of it. This was a situation where I had a very brief relationship with a guy, and he was very interested, and quickly in my it felt to me like he got delusional kind of quickly, like, oh, you're the one I've been waiting for, and I can't wait to. I mean, it just went so fast to a place that I was not ready for, and I became afraid, and I became afraid because of my history of trauma with delusional men, basically. Like, men who won't take no for an answer are a very specific kind of scary in my experience, and I think in the experience of a lot of women. And I think he felt like he was being charming, and I felt afraid for my safety because of old stuff. Anyway. And so I had this huge reaction, and I said, this is going too fast. Please slow down. And he said something like, I guess I got to come over to your house and convince you then. And I said, that's it. Never speak to me again. Never. Yeah. And I didn't speak to him, and he was so confused and so hurt. And this is a nice guy, like a genuinely nice guy, not the pretend kind, but truly a nice guy. And it was a year before I could even take a look at the possibility that I could have done something different. And I think I was wondering what my point was. And I think my point is that it can also take me a really long time sometimes to get from a place of saying, I was right about that though, he was wrong, and I didn't feel safe, and so it is okay for me to respond in that way. And I still kind of believe that all of that is true, but to get from there to a place of saying, okay, but if I had the same experience today, would I respond in exactly the same way? Yeah. And the truth is that during that year, I had made enough progress on 6 and 7 to not feel quite so much need to keep myself safe in this really sort of extreme way of deleting people from my life. I had been able to let go of some of that stuff. And so it was a year before, and I was talking to a sponsor, and I was like, but I was right and he was wrong, and he should know. And she was like, yeah, but does he know? And I said, no, because I left. Right. Anyway. And so I reached out to him to make an amend, and it was an unusual experience because I was really reaching out more to open the door than anything else. I was not reaching out to say, yeah, that's actually totally fine. Feel free to talk to people that way in the future. But I was reaching out instead to say, wow, I had a really big reaction to that I did not anticipate. And I'm sorry about that. And if you want, I can tell you why I reacted that way. And if you don't want to know, that's okay too. Wow. But I just want to know that I regret the largeness of that reaction. And I'm sorry it didn't work out between us, and I still intend for it not to work out between us. But I wish you well. Yeah. And that was, I don't know, that was just I think there's, there are a lot of places where our literature, I think, really is written. It was written by men who had more of a certain type of experience. And I think sometimes we women, or people who have a really different type of experience, like less anger, more repression of anger, less bullying others, more being bullied. I talked about that a little bit last time. Sometimes I think we have to do a little bit of fancier footwork and more careful sponsorship to figure out how this stuff can apply. Yeah. And that was just really an instance where I had gone really far to the other extreme of saying, nope, I was right. You're not supposed to act like that. And I was keeping myself safe. And then I was able thank God, to kind of come back to the middle and just say, I mean, maybe so, but also that's not how I have to respond today. And I can open the door.
Nice. Wow. Yeah. I had a similar situation. About over the last couple of weeks, I did one of my guys shared his fifth step, and I generally, when we're going through some resentment stuff with someone, I'll ask them at the end, like, what would God have you be in this situation?
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll say, like, you owe this person an amends, right? But what I've found over the years is that, like, it's not my place to convince them, right? And in some ways, like, don't get me wrong, like, I will try to, like, add some context to the situation. Whenever I'm listening to a fifth step, I try to add context to where, like, it's obvious, right? Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah.
like if you owe an amends and you cause some harms, I'm going to try to add enough context to where I realize when you're on, like, you got this solid case built on the first three columns, you know what I mean? And like, are we still in the space, to where, like, we're not willing to look at this from a different place or whatever. But anyways, like, but no, like, so it was funny because this past couple of weeks, he started off with, no, I don't know this this individual in amends, right? And I wouldn't have looked at it like that, But I was like, okay, all right, well, let's move to the next one, right? And then, like, after we were like 5 or 6 in, he was like, all right, I owe him an amends.
That's so good.
Yeah.
I mean, see, he got it to it within a few weeks. Meanwhile, I was a whole year before I was even willing to think about it. But I think that's part of my point is, like, that's a piece of amends that I did not understand when I first got sober, is that it can take time to change enough for me to change enough to be ready to make an amend. I can go through the motions and I can say what my sponsor says that I should say, and I will do that if I am told to do that. But in terms of actually changing and being able to open a door and being available for the potential connection that could exist, that for me, it takes time. It takes time.
Yeah. Thank God, honestly. I mean, like, I mean, it's what this whole thing is. It's just, what do they say? God's the only one that can open flowers. And you can't just open it with a hammer, right? And
that's great.
Yeah, it's good stuff. Man, that's cool. I love this. And like we spoke before, we'll do some more stuff after the beginning of the year if you're interested in it.
Sounds good.
Yeah, we'll do some more stuff.
For sure.
All right, well, cool. All right, any last words?
No last words. I told my last story that I wanted to tell. So thanks for having me on here. It's been fun.
All right, yeah, thank you so much. And until next time. Also, I sent you a copy of that
perfect.
Jay's his nightly inventory thing. Yeah, his
super
template.
awesome.
Yeah. All right, thank you so much.
And I'll send you mine. You're welcome.
All right, have a wonderful night.
Bye.
Hello. Thank you for listening to 3 Legacies Recovery Recordings. If you enjoy our program, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to share with a friend. We're also self-supporting, so feel free to contribute to the channel through Venmo at Recovery Recordings 615. Please note that the views expressed on this podcast are solely our individual views and do not represent any official stance of any 12-step program. We are not affiliated with any specific recovery organization, and this content should not be considered as professional advice for alcoholism or addiction.